Hello and welcome to Scholars Hub at Home. I am Carrie Williams, Associate Director of Alumni Events at York University. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar is part of our Scholars Hub speaker series and features timely and relevant educational lectures by academics and researchers from York. We're pleased to be able to bring this series online Wednesdays at noon to allow even more alumni and friends to hear from some of the university's leading scholars. A note of thanks to our audience for your support of our decision to cancel our September 9th Scholars Hub at Home session. 2 weeks ago, we took the opportunity to join the collective call to action to support the movement against anti-Black racism and police violence against Black, Indigenous, and racialized community. It was called Scholars Strike. We appreciate your support of this decision to stand in solidarity with community. The link to that should come up on your screen if you want more information. We're thrilled to be able to inform you that we have rescheduled that session to Tuesday, September 29th at noon. The session is called COVID-19 and the Environment, Behavior, Policy, and Implications for Sustainability, featuring Dr. Mark Winfield. If you had previously registered for the session, you don't need to register again. You will automatically receive an email with a link to join. And for those of you who haven't registered, who might be interested in this topic, please feel free to visit us at yorku.ca/alumni and friends to register. Along with Dr. Winfield's rescheduled session, we're happy to share we will be covering a range of topics throughout the fall term, many of which are suggestions from you, our audience, what you shared with us. Topics will include how schools are preparing during the pandemic, social media and bullying, as well as various pertinent and recent scientific advancements. Some exciting news from earlier this month on September 1st. Sorry, just one moment. On September 1st, the university announced the creation of the new Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change. It brings together expertise housed in the Faculty of Environmental Studies and the Department of Geography. This new Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change is believed to be the first of its kind in the world to bring together a critical mass of physical geographers, ecologists, social scientists, humanitarians, and artists whose innovative, world-renowned research address natural, built, and social spaces from a global perspective. And most recently, just earlier this month, the 2020-2021 academic year began. It goes without saying this year is unique, with the vast majority of courses delivered remotely. In her address to the community, President Linton said, "We are beginning this academic year with a renewed sense of who we are, what is important to us, and how much we are truly capable of achieving." We welcome you to read the full address at yfile.news.yorku.ca. Although we aren't all in the same location, we recognize many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of the university. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably care and share for the Great Lakes region. Before beginning today's lectures, we always like to get to know our audience by asking a question to you. A poll should appear on your screen now, and the question is, how would you rate your knowledge of today's topic? Today's topic is about back to school prep. If you could take a moment and complete that poll, that would be great. Thank you. We're going to share some results here just so we can get a sense. Somewhat informed. The majority of you are somewhat informed to minimal. And that sounds about right. A lot of us, I'm also a parent, a lot of us feel the same way. So this is quite a timely lecture. It's so helpful for us to understand who's in the audience. It's really helpful for our speakers to know who's in the audience as well. So thank you. If you need help with the Zoom webinar at any point, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and enter your question. Our team is there and ready to help you. That same button may be used to submit your questions for our guest speakers to answer during the Q&A period following today's presentation. And for those of you watching live on Facebook, please feel free to submit any questions or comments through the comments section of the video, and the team will send them my way. Today's talk is titled Back to School Prep, Strategies to Help Your Kids Succeed in Math and Promote Family Literacy, featuring Dr. Karen Krasny, PhD Professor, Language and Literacy, as well as Dr. Tina Rapke, Associate Professor, Faculty of Education. Dr. Tina Rapke is a parent of 2 elementary school children and teaches teachers how to teach math. She spends much of her time in math classrooms, researching and writing about best practices. Welcome, Dr. Rapke. And Karen A. Krasny, PhD, is Professor of Language and Literacy in the Faculty of Education at York. She is past president of the Canadian Association for Curriculum Studies and served on the board of the Canadian Society for Studies in Education. A long-standing educator, Dr. Krasny is a former K-4 early years English language arts provincial specialist for Manitoba and worked as a K-12 English and French language arts coordinator for the St. James Assiniboia School Division as a teacher for the Winnipeg No. 1 School Division. It is an absolute pleasure to have you both here with us today. It couldn't be more timely. I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Rapke first to start, and then Karen following shortly after. Thank you. Take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm really, really excited to be here. So I'm a university professor, and what you were already told was I'm actually really fortunate to be a mom of 2 young kids who are 7 and 9. So I'm going to share some of the things that I do with teachers in classrooms, but things that I also do at home with my own kids as well. And I'm really excited to have all the parents here because it's really important to me that kids have really great experiences with math. And I'm also excited to be sharing the Zoom floor with my colleague and friend, Karen Krasny. So she'll have some wonderful tips for you as well. I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation for today because I want to share some of the things that kids do, and I think it's just much more interesting to see what kids actually are doing and what they create. So let me share my PowerPoint presentation with you. Okay. All right, so I thought I would focus today around making math-friendly homes. And so what I'm here to tell you, the really great news is that we can actually do something as parents and as teachers to support kids to build these beautiful relationships with math. And the way that I'm going to get into that is I'm actually going to look at and share some of the research about attitudes towards math with you. And the great news again is that math attitude is not stable. So that's fantastic because that means that we can actually do something about kids' attitudes towards math. So I'm going to give you some really just easy to implement tips that you can use at your house. All right, so the way that it's looked at in literature, many scholars look at attitude in terms of 3 different things. So one of them is when you often hear kids say, I love math or I hate math, and they call that emotional disposition. The way that kids talk about how they are at math, so I'm good at math, or hopefully not, I'm bad at math, but they call that perceived confidence. And then how kids actually envision mathematics. So if it's something that they just have to memorize and regurgitate, or if it's around problem solving and thinking and those kinds of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you practical tips for each one of these. And I'm going to show you some really cool student work to show you what they're actually doing when you help them with these things. All right, so one of the things that I have my own kids do, and I do with kids in classrooms, is I actually check in and I gain insight into what the relationship with math is. And what I do is I just ask them to draw and write about how they do math in home and school. And I'm going to show you a few things that some students actually created for me. So this was from a grade 1 student. And as you can see, they have things like I love math. The person in the middle is actually that student, and there's lots of bright colors, and she told me that she wanted to keep lots of gorgeous colors in there because math just makes her happy. So that's what a grade 1 student, this is what their relationship can look like to them. All right, so here's a grade 2 student, and I just want you to look at this closely because you might find it interesting, something that the grade 2 student told me about their picture when I asked them about it. So one big thing is you can see that there's a big smiley face. So they have a really nice relationship with math. But this is a grade 2 student, so if you look at these questions, especially the middle one, the student told me that he included that question because it's a challenging question for him. So he loves the challenge of math, and he wanted that to be in how he's expressing his relationship with math. So it's just really cool stuff that they do for me. I'm really fortunate to be able to listen and be around kids all the time. So let me show you a grade 3 student. So he talked to me about this, and so just take a look because you might have some questions about things, and I'm going to let you know what he told me about his relationship with math. So the first thing that you might notice is that he's got happy faces with the numbers. And he told me that that's because he really likes numbers. So that's what math looks like to him. So that's fantastic to hear. The other thing that he told me about was if you look down at the bottom half, it actually has him and saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. So one of the things that he first told me about was that he didn't put hair on himself first. So he needed to make sure to put hair on himself. So that's great. And then the other thing I said, well, is it saying like, yeah, 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 like, yeah, 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 like boring, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he was like, no, no, look at the picture. If you look, I actually have my hands up in the air. And I'm going, yeah, 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 because he's excited to do some math. So that's quite lovely to hear. And it makes me really, really happy when I hear kids talk about math this way. The other thing that you'll notice is that when I do use this, if you look right at the bottom, I make it really clear to kids that I first thank them for sharing. And I also make it really clear to kids that I care about their relationship with math. So I think that's another important thing, just to draw attention to like little things and details with them as well. All right, so here are some really quick, easy tips when we think about perceived competence with kids. And so the number one thing that I tell parents when they're like, what's the one thing I can do to help my kids be confident math learners, is I say, don't tell them that you're not a math person. And the reason that I tell them that is because if parents tell their kids that, it might be that the kid doesn't actually take on the challenge in math and just thinks that they never had a chance. So they didn't get passed on that math gene. It's really important for us to actually model our good relationships with math as well. And if you don't have a good relationship, then now's the time to just fake it, and then it will become good as well. The other thing that I think is really important so that students feel like competent learners is to actually celebrate their ideas. Like I'm really fortunate because I'm my happiest when I'm listening to kids and their ideas. So we have like dance parties, we have high fives. I admit that I actually learned the scissor dance, so I'm actually quite a good I've got that down, smooth down pat. So make sure that, that you tell them that, you're a fantastic math learner. The other thing with perceived competence is what I find is really important. You might want to think, and you might think that I do math all the time with my kids at home. And what I'm here to tell you is I do it a few times a week. And maybe not believable, but I do it for like 10 minutes or less each time I do math. So I don't sit down at the table with them and work with them for like hours on worksheets or that kind of thing. What I do is I actually just do it in like bite-sized pieces, but I make it really focused. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about that, and I'll give you an example. But the research does tell us that this happens, mental math and the skills of mental math happen gradually over time. So don't overdo things with your kids. Just get them to talk out loud about how they're actually solving mental math problems. And then if you can, pull out some math from everyday problems that you do with them as well. So things like I was making breakfast and we were putting hash browns on the cookie sheet. And I got them to figure out, well, if we're all gonna have 3 hash browns, how many hash browns should we be putting in the oven? So things like that with every day. But again, if you feel a little bit more uncomfortable with that, just make sure to do some mental math with them every day and get them to share your solution, and then you can share your solution with them too. So it's all about the talking that happens. All right, so kids' vision of math. So this is the tricky one. And what I'm going to tell you is that you actually have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So you really do have to enact what it is that you're trying to endorse. So I right out say to my kids and kids in classrooms that math takes time and it's about thinking. And it's not just about the answer, it's about your ideas and your solution strategies. The other thing I do, which I practice wait time. And so I don't rush kids. And I say, are you ready to chat with me? Or if I'm in a classroom, I just get them to do this because I don't want them rushing with other kids going, I got the answer, I got the answer. And I say, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do a little signal to me like this, or you're just gonna look at me a certain way and then I'll know that you're done thinking about it, because I don't want you to feel rushed because math takes a lot of time. And then again, you want to check in with what their vision of math is. So you might be thinking, well, how am I going to do that? And so I'm here to tell you that you can actually just check in with them and listen to them. And I know that's what my colleague Karen Krasny will be talking about as well, as listening to kids. So I won't focus too much on that, but I have published in that area. So this is one way that you can check in with your kids, just going full circle, going back to them to draw about how they feel about math and what that looks like. So this picture was actually from a grade 6 student. And there's lots of things that we can perhaps take from this picture or what the student's indicating. But quite simply, I just asked her. And so what she told me was that she told me that this was the emoji face, this was the thinking face. And she told me that she drew that because math takes time and it's about ideas and thinking. So that's wonderful to see. So if you get your kids to draw these pictures every once in a while, it's a great conversation piece, even around the dinner table. They love talking about what they've created. So you can do this, every month or whatever works for you and your children. So the other thing with focusing on how kids are thinking about math and listening to them, I wanted to share an example with you. And this is just an example that I've had lots of kids doing is 3 times 9. And I get them to tell me how they're thinking about that and how they solved it. So this really amazing student, what they explained to me was that they think of 3 times 9 as 3 groups of 9. And so if you look, here's the 3 groups of 9 just on the screen there. And then they told me that, they weren't really a 9s person, they were more of a 10s person. And so what they did was they renamed the question or changed it so that they could think about it in terms of 10. So let me just show you what that looks like. So they just put 1 on the 4s, and then they had the 10. So then they quite simply just said, look, I just counted by tens. I went 10, 20, 30. And then they said, but I added those ones, so I had to take them off. So then they take off one to get 29, and then the next one to get 28, and then the next one to get 27. So then they tell me that 3 times 9 is 27. So again, to listen to this though, sometimes what I have to do is I actually have to put aside my own way of thinking and just really listen to what they're saying. So I just slow down and I just sit there and I listen and just really appreciate what it is that they're telling me. So that being said, since we're talking about talking and listening, I'm going to give the floor to my lovely colleague, Karen Krasny, who will be telling you more about listening to kids and building these really amazing homes where kids are happy and thriving.
Thank you, Tina. I just want to wish everybody a good afternoon and thank you for joining us. I'm more than delighted to share the platform with my dear colleague, Tina Rapke, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak with you today. And in the brief time that I have with you, I'd like to provide you with some strategies to support your child's literacy development at home. In today's schools, literacy instruction emphasizes the integral development of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing and representing. So these last two may require some qualification, but when, for example, middle school students engage in a critical analysis of gender in visual advertising, or young children are using picture clues to support their comprehension of printed text, they're exercising their skills at viewing. For that matter, when you and I are assembling IKEA furniture and trying to negotiate those wordless instructions, that's really pushing our viewing skills to the limit, I would say. When students, on the other hand, create advertisements or design a web page, or when children of all ages illustrate their own stories, they're engaging their skills in representing. Balanced or comprehensive literacy instruction integrates all 6 strands of literacy, and most activities have combinations of listening, speaking, reading, writing, viewing, and representing. I remind parents and caregivers that all learning happens best, and I'm sure, and Tina conveyed this quite strongly, that when children feel a sense of belonging and well-being, and they have meaningful opportunities to engage with the world around them and positive opportunities to express themselves, they will be successful learners. I recognize that there is a temptation right now among many to make up for class time missed by subscribing to or running out there and getting ready-made workbooks and grammar pages. And I would strongly recommend against it. Please don't mistake busy work for active learning. I hope in this next bit to leave you with some more enriching alternatives and provide you with some insights into literacy learning that will inform family literacy practices. And I've done my best to sort of give you an overview from K to 12 as best I can within the time given. It helps if parents, and I'll start with younger children, it helps if parents are familiar with key predictors of reading literacy. Early literacy predictors include alphabet knowledge, the ability to name both lower and uppercase letters, phonemic awareness, which I'll talk about a bit more later, word recognition or sight word vocabulary, and word knowledge. So knowledge about words, prefixes, suffixes, past tense, etc. Another notable predictor of reading comprehension is the ability to retell a story. So we often ask kids, what was the story about? But simple stick puppets are also a creative way to get kids talking and to facilitate their retelling of a favorite story. Please remember, and this is really important, that no single predictor or approach to reading instruction or to literacy can assure successful readers, but depends on the child's ability to access and integrate a range of skills in being able to make meaning from a variety of texts. While children rely on the active integration of a number of skills to read, phonemic awareness, or the ability to identify and differentiate sounds and words, p and b, k and s, remains the leading predictor of early reading achievement and a necessary precursor to understanding phonics, or the relationship between letters of written language and the sounds of spoken language, what we refer to as making graphophonemic correspondences. So most of us know this as sounding it out, but it is not the only strategy. We often think in terms of very simple graphophonemic correspondence is we often use cap, k, a, t, and we also rhyme. That's another way of building phonemic awareness. Finger plays, skipping songs, nursery rhymes, chants, lullabies, even camp songs, and picture books with rhyme, rhythm, and or repetition are all effective ways to foster phonemic awareness. Let's take, for example, Bill Martin Jr.'s popular book, Brown Bear, What Do You See? So many of you will recognize this. The book is available in a variety of formats. Here I have the board book edition that can be especially appealing to toddlers, preschoolers, and kindergarten children, as it fits comfortably in their hands. Now, the format also allows parents to observe their child's concepts about print. So, does the child hold the book upright? We've even done this with babies. And turn the pages. We turn the pages, of course, from right to left to follow the text from left to right in Western culture. So I'm going to read a few pages just to demonstrate how the book can foster a number of early literacy skills and be the basis for extended activities and a model for other reading. So Brown Bear, What Do You See? By Bill Martin Jr. Pictures by Eric Cara. Brown Bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. By now you're getting a sense that there's some predictability. Yellow duck, what do you see? I see a blue horse looking at me. And then we would expect to find the blue horse. So while reading the book aloud fosters phonemic awareness through the repetition of sounds, it offers children the kind of predictability that creates what Bill Martin Jr. once referred to as whole book success, to build initial reading confidence. With guided practice, repeated readings of the book help build word recognition and sight word vocabulary. Many parents have come to me over the years and said, their kid loves to read, but they've noticed that the child has actually memorized these early picture books. One way of focusing a child's attention on reading the words and making the connection between sounds and letters is to ask them to be the conductor. So it's like follow the bouncing ball and point to the words as they read. So brown bear, what do you see? If the child, as they're trying to be conductor, and there's no correspondence between where they're pointing and the words on the page, then the parent or an older sibling can gently guide the child's hand under each word and read it together. Okay, we do a lot of reading together with a child. We go from, there's more confidence when they're reading with the group than when they have to read individually aloud. So Brown Bear is also a valuable source for sentence patterning and helps children with sequencing skills and writing. For example, countless themed individual and collective class books have been written and illustrated by children by substituting Brown Bear with some other thematic content like Snowman, what do you see? I see Jack Frost looking at me. But perhaps even more relevant to this discussion, with the names of family members, pets included. So the child's name might begin with their name, Saida, Saida, who do you see? I see grandma looking at me, etc. And so one of the most delightful class books I've ever made was where kids used their own names, and they had silhouettes of each other looking back and forth with each successive page. So it's a wonderful book to exploit. And Bill Martin, too, patterned a number of his own books on this original favorite to give us Polar Bear, what do you see? And Panda Bear, Panda Bear. I want to also draw your attention to the words in the text, as the book introduces a number of sight words. Sight words, or sometimes you'll see them called Dolch words, are those generally regarded as the 315 most commonly used words, and can account for approximately 80% of the words in many children's books, and as much as 50% of the writing for adults. You'll find their graded word lists from pre-kindergarten to grade 3 and beyond are readily found on the internet. Readers who can recognize words quickly have an advantage. It helps with their fluency, and consequently, more fluency helps with comprehension. Again, before you get your printers out though, I remind you that the ability to read down a list of words is a discrete skill that does not necessarily indicate the child understands the meaning of the word. It is why I introduce vocabulary through literature or themed units of study, or other meaningful contexts, such as reading recipes, making lists, or reading environmental prints, such as signs and packaging. So memory games are an enjoyable way to practice reading sight words and letter recognition. With the assistance from parents or an older sibling, children can print out 2 matching sets of sight words, or even lower and uppercase letters onto cardstock, or I used a lot of times index cards, or paper to be cut apart for matching games, or alternately glued to bingo cards. So providing children of all ages with a wide range of books and online and print resources is important to creating a culture of literacy at home. So too, oral storytelling, religious texts, fables, and traditional folk tales and lullabies are a rich source of literary and cultural heritage and should not be ignored. In non-English speaking households, parents and elders are encouraged to read with their children in their home language. Regardless of the language, questioning for comprehension can be as simple as asking who, what, where, when, and why, and how to explore character, set, and plot. As children progress in their ability to read novels, they get into young adult novels, for example, after they've done early chapter books, and nonfiction or issue-based articles. You can help them with their critical comprehension by asking questions such as, why do you think the author chose to make a spider and a pig best friends? What is the writer's point of view on returning to school as COVID cases peak? But most of all, talk about books and films and try to make what educators call text to text, text to self, and text to world connections. Establishing family literacy practices mean that children routinely see the purpose for reading and writing effectively. And as Tina tried to convey, that they see you enacting these same practices at home too. They are more likely to do so if they are involved in maintaining family routines, like marking entries on the family event calendar, or composing grocery lists. They can also help you work out the budget too. Recording and sharing family recipes online, composing images for Instagram postings, sharing how-to craft ideas, or developing and editing the family's social media or newsletter. All of these things are family-based activities that demand a lot of literacy skills. Cooking provides an important experiential learning with sequence skills important in literacy learning, science, and math, and can serve for the basis of expository writing. For example, writing out the steps for how to make a milkshake or dad's favorite dip, involving kids in researching new purchases. And this was particularly of interest to me during the time that schools closed down and there wasn't many places you could go. But involving kids in researching new purchases or stay-at-home vacation plans can engage children in skimming and evaluating web pages and online videos for information, reading reviews, and acquiring new vocabulary while develop their research skills. My friend's 9-year-old daughter created her own interdisciplinary research project and spent a month last spring exploring the feasibility of backyard chickens in the GTA. At last report, my friend is relieved she continues to buy both her chickens and her eggs at the local supermarket, but there is no denying that her daughter applied her literacy skills in accessing and evaluating a variety of online sources to read about different breeds of chicken, to learn about how to build a coop and how to feed and care for chickens, as well as searching the internet to locate the city bylaws governing the number of chickens allowed on residential property in order to present her case. There are numerous lists of notable books for children of all ages to guide you and your child in making selections, and please involve your kids in making those selections together. Check out the Canadian Children's Book Centre website. The American Library Association also publishes an annual list of children's notable books for children of all ages and adolescent readers. And you can also access titles that have been awarded the Caldecott and Newbery medals. So one is given for the best picture book and the other one for the best young adult novel, considered by a team of judges in the United States. Considerable emphasis has been placed in recent decades on honoring diversity in both picture books and young adult novels. And just in closing, I want to leave you with one final thought, and it's a quote by the science fiction author, the late Ursula Le Guin. "We read books to find out who we are, what other people, real and imaginary, do and think and feel, or have done and thought and felt, or might do and think and feel, is an essential guide to our understanding of what we ourselves are and may become. There have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories." Thank you.
Thank you so much for that quote, Dr. Krasny. That was wonderful. And oh, great, Dr. Rapke, thanks for coming back on. That was so helpful. And I really want to acknowledge or say that I appreciate that you acknowledge the pressure that some members in our audience might be feeling around closing that gap of all the missed school and in the spring and what happened in the winter and spring. So your content is just so helpful, especially in that context. We now have time for our audience to ask any questions they may have for our speakers. If you're watching on Zoom, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And for those of you on Facebook, please submit your questions using the comment box for this video. So I'm going to start with a question for Dr. Rapke. Can you describe how an effective mathematics classroom or home-based learning environment looks or is different from what parents themselves might have experienced?
Thank you for that question. That's a really good one. I think what might be surprising is all the talking that's going on in mathematics classrooms and at homes that are math friendly, and all the listening that's going on. So it's not about, math is not the lone sport that people believe it is. It's actually people coming together and talking. So the volume is quite loud, and the listening, because not only when we're talking with kids, we're talking about their strategies and our strategies of how to solve something. So we're actually comparing and analyzing those strategies. So it's a lot of really intense listening and talking.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question from Michael. Either or both of you could take this. He asks, what strategies can you recommend to help parents to help their children better handle dealing with distractions, sort of to your point already, distractions and interruptions, or creating a more conducive learning environment?
I can begin by weighing in. One of the strategies I've used with, and it sounds really simple, and I hope it doesn't sound too reductionist, but it's an acronym that says it's JETS, J-E-T-S. And so I find that even as an adult, when I'm setting up my own work environment, J stands for job, in terms of, do I know my job? E stands for equipment. Do I have everything that I need for my equipment that I need to do the job? Okay, so even right now when I've started taking up sewing, before I start taking up sewing, I got to make sure that, including, you know, with the material or the fabric, I also have the thread and the right needles, etc., and an iron handy and that kind of thing. So it's, what's the equipment that I need to do the job? T is, how much time do I have? Okay, and am I using it wisely? And S is a sort of a self-reflective piece. Did I do a super job? And it doesn't mean that you absolutely finished that job, but am I set up to come back the next time? And so even through classrooms, when I've worked with large classrooms of kids, and if they get a little bit distractive, it's not, I just sort of tap them on the shoulder and they've learned the strategy. I might have had it posted in a classroom, but it's nice to even have on their desks as a little reminder. And I just say, Jess, and they get sort of sometimes back to work. But it's just something to think about, whether, you know, it's a handy one to remind, like often kids get distracted because they've got to get up and get that pencil, or they've got to get up and go get those scissors, etc. So hopefully people find that helpful.
That's great, thank you. Another acronyms are always helpful. Another question from our audience. Why is having a child draw their vision or perception so important? Is it because visual communication is easier than verbal? Is there evidence to suggest children think in pictures as opposed to words?
Yeah, so I have a fabulous colleague from Monash University, and this is her area of specialization. And so when I first saw it done, it was actually a large project across Canada. And there is research that says that, you know, students, it is a good way for them to communicate as well. So I think that's just an extra way. And on top of everything else, because we want to really focus on talking in math, they get to talk about what they've drawn too. So it gives you that extra practice of communication as well, which is what we want them to do. We want them to be communicating their math ideas and really listening to each other.
Okay, thank you for that. Two questions for Dr. Krasny. Could you repeat the name of the Canadian Center? There was a website you referred to, and you said a great source for finding books for children.
Yeah. The Canadian Children's Book Center is right here in Toronto, and they often, I mean, had it not been COVID, they host regular events and book launches. Actually, my co-authors and I, or co-editors and I, have had a book launch there, and but they also provide on that website the list of all the various awards that are given to new children's and young adult books, and they'll have lists of books and newsletters. So that's a wonderful source for Canadian content, I think. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So that's the Canadian Child Book Center.
No, the Canadian, the Canadian Children's Book Center, yeah.
Children's Book Center. Canadian Children's Book Center. There, right. We got it. Thank you. Next part of your question, for a question for you, a question about how you can help. Can you share how you can help sort of manage the habit of reading in these times of iPads, Netflix, and the internet? That's a question from our audience.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there are a number of ways to do this. I find that as we tend to read to kids when they're young, right? And we will read with them, and we'll have the picture books and that. But even in schools, the idea of reading with children starts to wane around grade 4 and grade 5, and certainly when they get into middle school. I think we can keep still reading with them. Okay. I mean, every family has their own sort of set of rules, but I know that whenever we came to the dining room, I'm a mother too. I'm the mother of twin sons who are now 29, but it's still a rule that when you come to the dinner table, then all electronic devices are off. Okay, no phones, those kinds of things. We're here to talk to each other. So even just talking, this is where we talk about books or talk about film and sort of make it relevant to our lives in some way, shape, or form, right? Now, that's not to say that you can't also take the interest they have, say, from possibly television or film, and generate interest about a book, not necessarily the same book, okay? But, like, because there's so many adaptations of young adult novels, et cetera, but to get a one that they say, oh, I see where you've liked that film, like you liked Braveheart or whatever. That was my son's favorite film. Okay, and I couldn't watch some of the scenes, but he could. But then I would start talking about what other books that might be relevant to that time in history. And there's a lot of fictional or novel that are historical fiction, and sort of integrate it that way. I mean, listening to them is a big piece. It is a question of, even if they're on screen, I want to know sometimes what they are watching and doing on screen, so that I can start with them in terms of building their interest in possibly books. Or I know it's very simple because with each situation it's different. My worry is often those kids who don't have ready access to the internet, in terms of that sort of technology gap between the haves and have-nots. So that's something that sort of preoccupies me a bit. But there's a way to work in there, always keeping in touch with what their interests are and making connections, and trying to, let them see you read. And then sometimes reading out an excerpt from a book that you're reading can get them engaged if it's provocative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Another question from our audience for Dr. Rapke. How concerned should a parent be when a child expresses a fear of math or a math phobia? How should one counteract those fears? All the examples you shared were kids that actually really liked math. So if this viewer is asking, what about the opposite when you get a not so, a darker drawing,
Yeah, well, I think that the first thing is don't freak out yourself. Just take a deep breath as soon as you see these things. And then the other thing,
as with almost everything in parenting, right?
So just
but yes, for sure with math.
Just take a deep breath, and then I would start focusing on really talking with your kids. So again, I pointed to mental math, and I'm really excited about mental math being in the curriculum now and having a heading in there, because I think it's something that parents have experience with themselves, right? Doing mental math themselves, and then talking about the questions and your strategies with your kids. I've actually been in a website called Mental Math for All, and what we've done is we've made those strategies visible, and we share kids' ideas around how to solve mental math problems. So the cool thing is we post 2 questions for each grades ranging from 1 to 8 every week, and then we post videos of kids' ideas. So even if you're a little fearful, or maybe you have a little bit of math phobia yourself, you can use this website, because the answers are actually in the videos, so you don't have to worry. You can just maybe have your kids start talking about it. Then once you see other people talking about what they're doing then and how they're solving those problems, then you can gain some confidence yourself as well. So it's this nice place to start, but just take a breath and then just start talking.
The mental math for all, is that like what age does that go up to?
It's from grades 1 through 8. And so
1 through 8, okay.
1 through 8. So every week there's 2 new problems posted for each grade level. And it's all based on the curriculum, and it's free right now. So if you have a child in grade 5, just go on and see those videos for grade 5, sign in and see those videos. Yeah. We're hoping actually, so myself and some of the best math educators that I know, we came together once COVID hit, and we decided what we could do, because we don't want to see kids struggling, and we know that they're not going to have that classroom time anymore. So we're thinking about how we can support parents best and get the best bang for parents' time, really. So yeah, so check it out and use the resources. They're free right now, so I hope you do.
Good. Thank you. This is very practical. Both of you have been providing such practical, real, helpful advice. So this is great. Another question that we have is, what resource, for Dr. Krasny, what resource should I be buying to support my child in their literacy learning? So you did talk a little bit about not buying worksheets, which I was like, okay, no, that's good to know, but maybe if you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually say that there is a plethora of resources out there. You can look at, and again, you always look at these at a critical eye, and we're not. I think what I fear is that parents feel like they have to replace their teacher, and that's a pretty impossible task. And so give yourself a big pat on the back. But if you look at publishers' websites, Scholastic Canada, they'll be teaching lessons. Okay, so skim through, see what feels comfortable. Pearson Educational's probably got some too. And a lot of these, and while we have an Ontario curriculum, I mean, I was, of course, involved with the Western Canadian Protocol all through the 90s. There were a lot of supplementary documents and teaching ideas, how to do a literature response journal, how to, activate, acquire, and apply. So getting kids to sort of, giving them just a part of the text to make predictions, to move on, and those kinds of things. There are tons of teaching strategies. And usually when I begin with, my classes with my teacher candidates, we research some of these strategies and the reason behind them, right? But you'll find all of this if you look on, if you just Google teaching strategies early literacy, or teaching strategies for, there's teaching strategies for young adult novels, such as Number of the Stars, which is a really popular one. It was sometimes very often children's introduction to Holocaust studies. So there are those things. There will be for, during Black History Month, although I wish they'd integrate that all through the year, there will be all kinds of resources online. So if you Google them, most of them are reputable. And if they're attached to, for example, a school board, we all kind of use a lot of the same strategies. There's some really basic ones that we start with. So I think that you'll find some of those things online, and you need to spend an evening to kind of critically go through them, what you think might be useful for you.
Great. Thank you. Some really practical tips there. We are at time. We had lots of questions coming in. But that was so great. Thank you so much for your expertise, your research, your helpful tips on this, and just for your time today. So thank you very much. We're going to wrap up today's show for now. We do have one last poll question for our audience. And the question is now, how would you rate your knowledge of today's topic after this really insightful discussion from both of our speakers today? If you can take a moment to respond to that, that would be great. So feel free to share today's talk with your friends. It will be posted on our York Alumni YouTube channel. We will also try to get a bunch of those links and resources that you talked about and sort of get that out to the audience as well to find those pieces. You may also join our LinkedIn group or follow us on Facebook by searching York University Alumni, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at YorkU Alumni. Feedback about this or any of our programming is welcome and can be sent to us via our social channels or at alumni@yorku.ca. And you're welcome to join us next week for 2 days of Scholars Hub at Home programming. On Tuesday, as I had mentioned earlier, Tuesday, September 29th at noon Eastern Time, we have our rescheduled talk, COVID-19 and the Environment, with Dr. Mark Winfield, Professor, Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change, and co-chair of the Faculty Sustainable Energy Initiative. And then on Wednesday, September 30th at noon Eastern Time, you may join us for the topic of our talk is addressing Mi'kmaq history in the novel. The novel is called Nin de Owe Inik Glen, Mi'kmaq St. John's in England, with Professor Benita Lawrence, Department of Humanities, chair of the Department of Equity Studies and coordinator in the Indigenous Studies program. To learn more about those 2 sessions and to see the rest of our fall lineup, please visit our website at yorku.ca/alumni friends and click on events. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you got some great tips to help your children. Hope to see you next week. Thank you and be well.